We all know who the top guy of a wrestling company is. He is the main event. He is the face on the poster. He is the guy holding the gold when the big show goes off the air. But there is always another guy, the guy standing right behind him, the one who is so close to the top that you can almost taste it. He is right there, one good night away, one big win away from changing everything. Sometimes he gets his moment, sometimes he waits forever and the moment never really comes, and sometimes he flips the whole thing on its head and becomes number one himself. That is the fun part. That is the part nobody can ever predict. So today we are going through the entire history of this company, and we are tracking that second guy, the runner-up, the almost ace, the man in the shadow of the top star in every single era. And trust me, some of these stories have wild endings. Let's get into it. Alright, so we have to start at the very beginning back in 2019. The company is brand new, everything is fresh and exciting, and nobody really knows what this thing is going to become. There were a lot of doubters too. A lot of people who did not think a new company could actually go toe-to-toe with the big dogs. So there was a real chip on everybody's shoulder. And at the very top of the mountain was Chris Jericho. Now Jericho was the perfect first champion. He was a legend. He had the name value. He had been everywhere and done everything in this business across his whole career. When this new company needed someone to put the very first world title around their waist and make people take it seriously, Jericho was the man. Think about how important that actually is. You are a brand new company. You need instant credibility. You need someone the whole world already respects to carry your top prize. And Jericho did exactly that. But who was right behind him? Who was the number two breathing down his neck? That was Jon Moxley. Moxley had just shown up and the entire wrestling world lost their minds. This was a guy who walked away from the biggest company on the planet to come here and do his own thing. Think about how rare that is. Most people spend their whole lives trying to get to the top of that mountain. He got there and then he left it on his own terms to bet on himself somewhere new. He was raw. He was violent. He felt dangerous in a way that nobody else did at the time. When he walked out, the whole feeling of the room changed. He did not feel scripted. He felt real. And the fans connected with that instantly. And here's the thing about being the number two guy. Sometimes you do not stay number two for very long. Moxley chased Jericho. He hunted him. And at the very first Revolution event, he took the title and became the new top guy of the company. The number two became number one. And it would not be the last time that happened in this story. So now the roles flip. Moxley is the ace. He is the man. And this is a huge moment because Moxley becomes champion right as the whole world shuts down. The pandemic hits, and live events basically disappear overnight. No fans, no tickets, no big loud arenas. Everything just stopped. And Moxley just carried the company on his back. Empty buildings, no crowds, none of the energy that makes this stuff feel alive. You feed off a crowd in wrestling. The noise is half the magic. And all of that was gone. And he still went out there every single week and delivered. He went into these wild, brutal fights and made you care even with nobody in the seats. He was the rock that the whole thing was built on during the scariest time. A true fighting champion when the company needed one most. He earned every bit of that top spot and then some. But again, there is always a number two. And during this stretch, you had a young man making everybody furious in the best possible way. Maxwell. The kid in the fancy coat with the loudest mouth in the building. Every time he opened his mouth, you wanted to reach through the screen. And that is a compliment. That is the hardest thing to do in this business. Make people feel something that strong. Now he was not quite ready to take the throne yet. He challenged Moxley and he came up short. He was just a little too young, a little too early in the journey. But you could feel it. You could feel that this guy was being built into something massive. He was the future. He was the number two in waiting. Hold that thought because he comes back around in a big way later. A really big way. So let's keep moving. Because the next top guy might be the best of the entire run, Kenny Omega. Oh man, when Kenny finally reached the top, this company hit a whole new level. A lot of people who follow this stuff closely will tell you that Kenny Omega had the single greatest title run in the history of the place. And honestly, it is hard to argue with that. Kenny would walk out draped in gold from companies all over the world. He had belts from everywhere stacked on his shoulders. He looked like a video game final boss. That was the whole vibe. He was the impossible last level you had to beat. He wrestled these long epic matches that people still talk about to this very day. Match of the year type stuff over and over again. He felt unbeatable. He was the cocky, arrogant champion that you absolutely could not wait to see get knocked off his perch. He made you angry. He made you want to see him lose so badly. And that is exactly what a great top villain is supposed to do. So of course, who is the number two? Who is the guy the entire audience is dying to see finally do it? The Cowboy, Hangman Adam Page. And this one is special because Page was not just a challenger. He was a story, a real human story. This was a guy with self-doubt, a guy who was not sure he belonged at the top. A guy who had to go on this long emotional journey just to believe in himself. He stumbled. He doubted. He had to figure out who he was. The fans did not just want Page to win, they needed him to win. They were emotionally invested in this man like nothing else at the time. It stopped being about wrestling and started being about this person they had watched grow. He was the people's number 2. The underdog everybody in the building was pulling for with everything they had. And he got there. At Full Gear, Hangman finally climbed the mountain and beat Kenny and became the top guy. The Cowboy did it. After all that doubt, after all that searching, he stood on top, and the place absolutely erupted. It was one of those moments where you remember exactly how it felt. But here is where things get a little messy, because around this exact time, the biggest free agent you could possibly imagine walked through the door. CM Punk. Punk had been gone from wrestling for years. 7 long years. People genuinely thought they would never see him in a ring again. He had moved on. He had said his goodbyes. That chapter felt closed forever. And then the music hit and the building came completely unglued. People were crying. People could not believe their eyes. It was one of the loudest reactions this company has ever gotten. So now you have this incredible situation. Page is the top guy. He is the champion. He is the one who earned it the hard way through that whole emotional climb. But Punk is the number 2 by sheer star power alone. He did not have to climb anything. He is the biggest name in the building the second he shows up. The aura was just that big, and these two collided. Punk took the title from Page and became the new top guy, and for a moment it felt like the sky was the limit, but then it all kind of fell apart behind the scenes. There was real-life tension. There was a now infamous backstage situation that caused a ton of problems for everybody involved, stuff that spilled out way beyond the ring. And eventually Punk was gone. It was a wild, chaotic stretch. Big highs, big drama, some of the highest peaks, and some of the messiest valleys all packed close together. And when the dust settled, it left the top spot wide open. Which brings us back to the kid in the coat. Because by now, he was not a kid anymore. Maxwell finally got there. Remember how I told you to hold that thought? Well, this is the payoff. The guy who had been the number 2 in waiting for years, the loudmouth who came up short way back when, he finally became the top guy. And he did not just grab the spot, he grabbed it and held on for dear life. He became the longest reigning champion this company had ever seen up to that point. He held that title for over 400 days. Think about that, over a full year on top. He was the face of the company through all of it. He cut these incredible promos that made you love him and hate him at the same time. He could make you laugh and then make your blood boil in the same breath. He was everything they had been building towards since the very early days. He went from the annoying loudmouth in the background to the undisputed ace. That is the full circle moment. That is the patience paying off. The number 2 who waited his turn and then refused to let go. So who was his number 2? Who was nipping at his heels this whole time? A lot of people would point to the veteran, Samoa Joe. Joe had been a monster everywhere he had ever been, for years and years across every company he stepped foot in. And he came in here and quietly became one of the most dangerous men on the whole roster. He was the immovable object, the guy you did not want coming after your title. When Joe locks in on you, it feels like bad news is coming. And at the very end of the year, Joe shocked everybody. He beat Maxwell and became the new top guy. Now, Joe's run was short. It was more of a placeholder than a long era. Sometimes the company needs a steady hand to hold things for a moment while the next big thing gets ready. And Joe was that. But make no mistake, he was the champion. He held the top spot, and he proved he still had every bit of it left in the tank. But the real shift, the real changing of the guard, that came next. And this is where the whole company started to feel different, like a brand new day was dawning. The American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Now, Danielson is a legend, one of the greatest to ever do it, period. The kind of name that earns instant respect anywhere in the world. But here's what made this so interesting. Danielson had basically said his time as a full-time wrestler was running out. The end was near. So when he chased the top spot, it felt urgent. It felt heavy, like this might be the final chance for one of the all-time greats to grab the brass ring one more time before he stepped away. And in front of a giant stadium crowd at the biggest show of the year, Danielson did it. He beat Swerve and became the top guy. And the whole place came apart. It was one of the most emotional moments in the entire history of the company. The veteran finally reaching the summit when everybody knew his clock was ticking down. Sometimes the chase is even better when you know it might be the last one, and this was exactly that. But a top run does not last forever, and the man waiting in the wings, the number 2, was an old familiar face, Will Ospreay. Ospreay came in and instantly became must-see television. Every time he stepped through the ropes, you knew you were getting something special. You did not want to miss it. He had these jaw-dropping matches that people called some of the best ever put on in this company. He could do things in that ring that did not look humanly possible. He was the number 2 that the audience desperately wanted to see reach the very top. the incredible talent knocking on the door over and over again, the guy who felt like it was only a matter of time. That is what a great number 2 does. He makes you believe his moment is coming. And the chase continued from there. The top spot kept getting passed around the new generation. Names like the masked daredevil Darby Allin, the fearless one who would throw his body off of anything and everything to get to the top. Ladders, whatever it took. He did not care about his own safety one bit. He became one of the faces of the company and eventually got his own run at the very summit. So let's zoom out for a second, because when you line it all up, it tells you something really cool about this company. Every single one of those guys had somebody right behind them, somebody chasing, somebody waiting, somebody dreaming about taking that top spot for themselves. And the coolest part, so many of those number 2 guys did not stay number 2. They kept their heads down, they kept grinding, they waited for their shot, and then they grabbed the top spot for themselves and never looked back. That is what makes this stuff so much fun. The top of the mountain is never safe. Not ever. There is always somebody climbing right behind you, always somebody hungry, and the guy in second place today could very easily be the guy holding all the gold tomorrow. That is the beauty of it. Nothing ever stays the same for long. If you enjoyed this one, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps the channel out more than you know. Subscribe if you are new, because we do this kind of thing all the time around here, and I will catch you in the next one. Take it easy, everybody.